that human element. We provide an essential service to life and prosperity, right? Mind blown. You flip on the light, you think, oh man, Grant PUD, affordable rates. Man, it's so much bigger than that. How do you meet the needs of a growing society, in the space that we serve?
Welcome back to DAM, the official podcast of Northwest Hydropower. I'm your host, Austin Rohr, and I manage all things communications here at Northwest River Partners. Have you ever had something all planned out and it went sideways on you? Have you? Of course you have. That's how it goes in life, and that's how it goes sometimes in podcasting too. Luckily, all is not lost here at DAM, because, well, you're diving into another episode of your favorite hydropower podcast as we speak. And we have some great friends here at Northwest River Partners, including today's guest, our good friend Danny Combs at Grant PUD. Now, quite frankly, Danny saved my bacon today, but I think I'm cutting into his a bit because he had to take some time out of his lunch to make this happen. So, Danny, thanks for jumping in.
Hey, it is my pleasure to be here with you, Austin. I'm a genuine fan of what you're doing here and everything that Northwest River Partners is a part of. And if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I need to get into character here a little bit and just want to say welcome everyone to this podcast. I am your main talking head, Danny Combs, and thank you for taking a few minutes out of your day to be here with us on the best damn podcast on the web space right now. I hope I can say that, Austin. But just a pleasure to be here and share with you a little bit about the podcasting world that I'm in and learn more about the space that you're in, because I think they're very different, but some similarities and some commonalities I'm excited to explore.
Well, I think we can certainly get away with that because there is no spelling in podcasting, right? So we'll editorialize, it's obviously D-A-M, not D-A-M, and then, a following letter. And that's an important distinction. So, we've got a lot of awesome stuff to talk about today. We've got podcasting to discuss. We've got awesome things going on at Grant, including your own hydropower projects. But before we get there, tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do at the utility.
Well, I've been everywhere, man. I started off with Grant PUD working summers in our fish and wildlife department when we were physically removing juvenile salmon from our gate wells and depositing them downstream of the rivers or of the dams there to help support that effort and progressed in many different departments throughout my time here. I'm a transplant to the area. One of the things I love about Grant PUD is it really feels like a family organization. I am a transplant to the state, but born in California, raised in Las Vegas, moved up here, love everything about Central Washington and Grant County. Currently, I serve in a role as a frontline contributor for our corrective action program, very prevalent in nuclear. That's probably another podcast topic, but and actually our podcast here at Grant started out as a corrective action to address gaps identified in our communications related to the COVID response. And quickly we realized that, hey, there's something here, and going on 3 years now, haven't missed a Thursday barring holidays or organizational events. And it's just, I'm the luckiest guy at Grant PUD that I get to sit every week and interview a new guest about a topic that is pertinent to our employees, and happy to be here today to share with your audience a little bit more about Grant PUD, the fabulous customers we serve in this incredible county, and learn a little bit more about your podcast too.
Absolutely. And, the interesting thing So I do have, a little bit more familiarity with Grant than say some of the other utilities in our membership, and that's not to say that I'm, biased towards you guys by any means. We love all of our members here at Northwest River Partners, but I do have that little bit of extra background knowledge on the utility. And, yet when we were discussing this the other day and kind of, getting prepared to make this podcast happen, I think you mentioned to me that there's something like 800 employees there. Am I correct in that number? Something around that ballpark?
Yep, we're almost there.
And so it's crazy, I mean, it makes sense, right? You guys are a fairly large utility. You serve a fairly large customer base and a very wide-ranging customer base, which we're going to dive into later on in the episode. But it's interesting to think, at the same time, it is this family atmosphere, and there are so many roles and so many challenges that the utility faces. And, really, as you're speaking to, the podcast is that you host there is sort of this necessity born out of COVID, which in some ways is actually the reason that we have this podcast that we do here today. And so tell me, what was sort of what kind of led to you becoming the host of this podcast, and what is your podcast aim to do there at the utility? Because I know it is a little bit different than maybe the traditional podcast people are listening to like today on, Spotify or Apple Music or anything like that.
Yeah, very, very much a homegrown effort. Wouldn't be possible without leadership support. Our public affairs team is the production squad. They do all the heavy lifting, and I get to show up and interview the guests. But what we realized early on, and Grant PUD was very proactive in March of 2020, despite some maybe unpopular decisions, we closed the offices, sent our employees home, other than critical roles to keep the lights on. And as we're sorting through what everyone in the nation was dealing with, I was a part of a group that was out there trying to help deliver these communications that were very crucial, these top-down communications that needed to be spread throughout the organization. We just really weren't set up for that, although we were gaining some momentum there. And really, as reporting back on what we were finding as we were out there doing these frontline interviews and such, it just kind of came out. I mentioned like, hey, the president's on TV like every day, right? So why doesn't the general manager just do an announcement? We can do some Q&A. We can do some things like that. And man, from there, it just kind of took off, and our great public affairs team put a spin on it, right? Let's make it more like a show. And it's taken me a while to wrap my head around that, right? Because it's really just trying to get information to the people that need it. So it's one platform for that here at Grant PUD. Just one way that folks can engage. We have this live option. It's not pre-recorded, so that people can send in questions and answers, and we can provide answers on the spot with whoever the subject matter expert is that's providing me the topic that day. So I've 160 topics that we've kind of covered over the years now, and it's just been a really great time. We infotainment, whatever you want to call that stuff. We try to deliver that, send everybody out with a message that they can carry through to their week, and then, hey, come on back next Thursday at 2. We're gonna do it again.
No, it's really cool, and it's something that I think so often doesn't get discussed enough. Is like, there is this, as much as people maybe on the outside of utilities especially, they're going to be interacting with communications that reach them, whether it be mailers, whether it be newsletters, things on your website, social media, community engagement, so on and so forth. But there really is a value in making sure that people within the utility, which is almost, especially at 800 employee, I mean, that's a community in and of itself. And those people need to be communicated with and communicating with one another as well. There's a value there for sure.
Yeah, and we've been very fortunate and have seen the outcomes of communicating through this forum. We do internal newsletters. We do mailings of some sort. I don't think we've tapped into any internal social media. This might be as close as it gets, right? Hanging with your boy here on a Thursday and getting caught up on things that are going on, and back to that community piece, it's everybody here by and large is rooted in this community. They were born and raised here, they were grown up here, and you can't help but set roots as soon as you get here. The Grant fam, shout out to the Grant fam, right? Team Grant, all those types of things that really bring us together. And this is just one more place for us to come together and have really good and engaging discussion and inform people about things that are going on in our business. You know, we have really cool topics from people that perhaps worked for the Columbia Irrigation District prior to coming to Grant PUD, and learning about what a crucial role Grant PUD plays in that, with that organization and the partnerships there. And man, when you really just start to pull the lens back, you realize, one in the grand scheme of things, one kind of small utility in Central Washington and the impact that we have over the entire region, man, it is so cool and super exciting to be in this business.
And I think that's, it speaks to how fantastic this platform is, especially, the podcasting platform is, in terms of being able to share knowledge and being able to get everybody kind of talking about things that otherwise maybe we don't always have the time to talk about. But, we can make time to listen to this and hear what other people have to say. And I would imagine even there's a value in that for Grant, as far as, hey, the guy that's coming to your house to maybe do some basic work or whatever in the neighborhood. Maybe that person heard a fun fact on your podcast that they can then kind of just, share with the community. Like, hey, did you know this about, like irrigated ag, like you're talking about, for example? I mean, I'm sure that there's so much of that probably goes on that otherwise wouldn't happen if you didn't have that ability to share knowledge.
Yeah, and we have great agriculture here. It's one of the main culture shocks for me when I first moved here, coming from Las Vegas, and love our ag community. They're one of our core customers, right? You can't have the irrigation that you have without the power that drives those pumps. And you've had some really great guests on your show that have really helped with that spread of information. Your platform is taking a much larger message and delivering it, putting it in a place, I should say, where audiences can come to it and to learn. What was the buildup like for you? I'm interested. What was the buildup like for you, right? You don't decide on a Wednesday and then do a podcast on a Thursday. What was it like for you? Where did the seed come from, and to the plant that we're looking at today?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The thing that I discussed maybe briefly in our sort of introductory episode, but only really briefly touched on, is there was a need, I think, for us from a communication standpoint, going through COVID and coming kind of out of COVID onto the other side of things. Even now, certainly a lot of people are still not working in maybe the way that they traditionally did pre-pandemic, of trying to find ways to really give our membership a voice. Because ultimately, here at the organization, we lean heavily on being fact-based, right? We want to be credible. And that was something that we took very seriously from pretty much day one. Kurt and I both started at a very similar time here, and we're the only two people here in the office. So, we went through all of our sort of outward communication. We went through our website. We're like, if anything isn't able to be backed up by fact, it's got to go, right? We cannot rely on any information that we can't back up with something, and it has to be credible, because we're talking about sometimes controversial topics. We're talking about really challenging subjects, and we can have conversations about maybe what is or isn't agreeable in terms of science, but we can't go back and forth on opinion, and we're just not going to get anywhere. But that takes so much time and effort that then it has to be communicated in a way that, say, it comes through an op-ed, it comes through a social media post, it comes through really short form content that is very easy to digest, and it gets messages out there. but it's not really telling stories. And we know how much value there is in being able to tell stories. And so we want to be able to tell stories that aren't just maybe, here's what salmon are doing in the Columbia and Snake River. Here's, why these particular dams are great. Our members are, utility, ag, ports, all these different industries and variety of things that cover Washington, Idaho, Oregon, Montana, Wyoming. I mean, we cover a large membership base. They're doing so many great things in so many different ways, and Grant obviously being a big contributor of that. So originally, kind of the thought was we're going to make videos, and those videos are going to highlight what our members are doing. They're going to highlight something awesome that they've got going on. And I sent you the link to it, I believe, as well. The only one that we ever really made happen before COVID and everything else was coming out to Grant to film one of your hatcheries at one of your dams. And it's a great video. I love the video. I'm so, happy with how it turned out and everything like that. But then it turned into okay, well, we need to find more people that are willing to do more videos, which means, you got to get in contact with somebody. You need access. You need to kind of make a plan. It takes a lot of work to make it happen. And when you throw the variable of, no human contact and nobody going in and working unless they're absolutely essential and everything like that, it's we can't go out into the real world and make that happen and make it happen consistently enough. You can make it happen here and there, but it's really, and I'm sure you understand this because you never miss a Thursday, right? I mean, you have to be consistent in this stuff. You cannot just kind of throw things out there here and there and expect to really be successful in terms of sharing those stories with the audience you want to share them with. And so for us, it was well, we can do a podcast because we have Zoom, right? We have the tool we're using today. It's relatively, I don't want to say it's easy. It's not easy, but as far as making it happen and making it happen consistently, it's something that I felt very confident in that we could rely on. And I think it's been a really powerful tool so far. And, we've been able to tell some really great stories here on DAM so far and share some really great information. And, I think this will be our 10th episode that we're recording here now, and the 10th episode people will be listening to. So that's basically 10 plus hours of knowledge and information that, that resource, I believe personally, and I hope that our audience believes as well, our growing audience, it's a very valuable resource. And I think that, and like you said, you've covered 160 topics with your podcast?
Yeah, roughly. And at this point now, we're fortunate enough that, our internal customers, so to speak, are coming to us. Hey, we've got this change. We want to communicate it. Hey, we've got this thing coming up. We want to communicate it. Again, one communication platform, and we reach on average between 150 and 200 employees per live episode. And then we also put them recorded so that folks can go back and watch them after the fact. So, and from what I've been told, if you can reach that percentage of your audience, whomever you've decided that audience is, you're doing pretty good. So incredibly proud of the effort that we're putting forth here. It's been an incredible success for everyone that's been involved. None of it where nobody wants to listen to me, hydropower stooge talk for 30 minutes about things I know nothing about, right? There's 100 people here better suited to speak to the various topics that Northwest River Partners is involved in and the things that are out there. But I just feel like I have such a passion and energy for renewable, reliable, clean, safe power, right? One of your guests really hit it home, and I wish I could recall. Shout out to your fantastic guest list, but one of the guys said, if you look at countries where you find, I believe it's like aberrant poverty, you'll see one of the main contributors is a lack of clean, reliable power, right, to these areas. And it just, every one of your stories, spoiler alert, ties back to that human element, right? It's that human element. We provide an essential service to life and prosperity, right? Mind blown for a guy that just, pushes some papers around and updates some spreadsheets and stuff like that, to know that I am a piece in a larger system that feeds a larger system that is responsible for our entire area. And we're just talking about the service of power, not to mention that Grant PUD is installing one of the most comprehensive fiber backbones in the area. Incredible work that's been going on there. Just a dedication by our commissioners. I mean, that's becoming another essential service. Also, we're relying on that day to day to work and to live. If your internet goes out, I mean, that can be detrimental, right? I mean, hey, sorry about the Netflix, right, or your Xbox, but I mean, we got folks over here holding Zoom meetings, trying to record podcasts and stuff. I mean, it's another reliability. I mean, went as far as to add that into our mission statement, right? Just another one of those critical services that we're so fortunate to be able to provide, to the residents here.
Absolutely. And not only that, also very affordable services, might I add, which we like to brag about here often, and I'm sure you do there. But, you speak to a really good point, which is that there's something to be said for what utilities provide, what, not just, here we obviously talk about hydropower, and that provides many various benefits to our region, but energy being a primary component of that. It's easy to hear that line of like, oh yeah, it's essential to our everyday lives, and be like, yeah, naturally, right? But you don't want to take it for granted, because if it wasn't there, I mean, you can't even fathom that, right? I mean, that's really hard to imagine if we lived in a situation where we can't reliably have a Zoom meeting like this because, hey, this might not work today. We don't know. It's going to be a little hot. Maybe the power is going to go out for a bit. Who knows? I mean, that just doesn't even cross our minds. And, again, that it kind of comes back to like, that's that value in having a platform like a podcast where you can really tell that story, add that human element, and make that connection that maybe otherwise, people, I don't want to say they don't make it, but again, it's like so natural. It's such a given. We've all essentially, been born and raised with that condition in, at least in our lifetimes. And so it's not something that you really would ever think would change. And not to say that it will change, but there is a potential it could if the wrong decisions are made for energy policy and things like that.
Yeah, and that's another aspect of Grant PUD. We're very, very up to date. We have a great group of external affairs folks that stays up on all those changing policies, and with the growth in the area, looking for sources of energy that will, the backbone of hydropower will always be a thing in Grant County, but you can't just keep plopping dams in the river. I mean, sorry about it. We love them, right? We love our dams. Let's keep the dams we got, right? Hey, shout out. Let's keep the ones we got, right? And if I think that there's some really great information on this show about some of the other clean energy, clean energy resources that are out there, and what that looks like in the grand scheme of things. I love how you pull all that together. I'm new to kind of understanding all that. Kurt Miller came on our podcast here at Grant PUD. It was fantastic to have him. He actually spoke at our Employee Appreciation Day virtually, by the way, a couple years ago. Just made me feel so proud to be a resident of Grant County and an employee at Grant PUD. So shout out to Kurt for doing that. And Kevin Nort told me to say hello, by the way, Austin. but yeah, and as we look towards the changes that are coming in those policies, it's really exciting to see that Grant PUD, in pursuit of a clean energy future, is exploring advanced nuclear, hydrogen, and those types of things. We're in that exploratory phase, which is super exciting, man, because it just shows that we've looked at our current portfolio and understanding how are we going to meet the needs of the demand that is being put on. I mean, you talked about those affordable rates. I mean, that drives customers to your area. And we've seen a huge growth in requests for load from some of these large industrial customers. And some people may see that as big time corporations coming in to pull the rug out from under the little guy. But we have steadily maintained affordable rates for our core customer groups, our residents, our ag, and our small businesses. And we're all about community and thriving, but there is a place for industry within that, because we do have such an incredible resource. And as we're expanding our infrastructure, I mean, you got to think about it. Just because you can make more power, you got to be able to send it down the line somewhere, right? So there's just so much that needs to factor in, and seeing the growth in our county just makes me, again, just brings it back to that pride for the work that we get to do every single day. And I'm just happy to be here with you and to get to talk about it. But I do want to go back just a little bit. What was the lead up to that first launch? I mean, did you guys, you and Kurt do a great job in that first episode, kind of setting the stage a little bit for what's to come. And you guys didn't disappoint, right? I mean, every episode since has just been a banger. But as you're deciding to do this, I mean, is it as simple as record and release, or did you try to have a few in the can before you launched? I mean, because I'll be honest, I love what I get to do every day, but sometimes I wonder what would the big world be like, right? What if I walked out of my little front yard here, right, our little front yard, and explored this big world of podcasting that's out there, and there's an audience for it. There's an audience for the information that's shared on your podcast. I just want to know more about that.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll say, kind of address your last point there, is that there is a niche to be filled. I mean, everybody these days wants a podcast, right? And there's a podcast for everything. And you seem like you talk to anybody, oh yeah, I want to start a podcast. Oh, me and my friends do a podcast. Oh, I listen to this podcast and that. I mean, it's kind of the hit thing, right? Which is kind of funny to think about, coming full circle in terms of media consumption, because if you really think about it, radio is sort of the precursor. It's sort of the thing that eventually, becomes what we have now, which is, this ability to freely listen anywhere, anytime, to anything we want. And, I had a little bit of background in kind of doing communications in radio. So, it's funny to see that we've again come full circle, and now it's like podcasting is in such high demand. It's so popular. And yet, somebody might go, gee, why would you have a hydropower not only a hydropower podcast, a Northwest hydropower podcast? I mean, it is so niche. And, I'm sure you can relate in terms of, you're going to have a Grant PUD podcast. I mean, your entire focus is going to be lasering in on what's happening at just one utility, broadcasting to, your fellow employees there. But it's interesting because I think that there's a necessity for it. And I think that niche deserves to be filled. It's not talking about nothing, certainly, and whether it's the topics you've covered or the topics I've covered, the guests that we've both had, I mean, there's a good reason to sit down and give those people the floor to discuss and share their knowledge and tell their story. The idea for this really kind of started, I would say, maybe September of 2021. So that's when we started saying, hey, I think we should do this. Let's look into it. Let's see if we can make that happen. Let's try and make it part of our kind of, greater media plan, and try and make it a part of our communications here at the organization. That turns into, okay, well, now we have to figure out what equipment we need. We have to figure out what the needs are in terms of the software to record on, the software to edit on. How are we gonna actually produce the thing, right? And so figuring that out, budgeting it out. I mean, thinking about all of the elements that could possibly go into that. I had the opportunity, the very fortunate opportunity to speak with Paul Dockery, who hosts Public Power Underground, which is another popular utility-focused podcast, and yet completely different from what either of us do. So, there's time in your day to go listen to that as well. You're not going to get much overlap there. And I encourage people to, shout out to that one. And Paul gave me some really great advice on, this is what I do. This is what works for me. This is, the stuff that can help you get started so that you can actually get this thing up and running and reach an audience. And then it became, okay, let's make a plan. Let's kind of, create sort of a plan, a strategy that says, this is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. These are our goals, really build out the entire idea of the podcast. And then it came down to, okay, we got to test this thing. We got to hit record. We got to see how it works. And so Kurt and I sat down here at the office and, sat across the table from one another, and we recorded that episode, I think maybe like 6 months before we released that first episode. And so we recorded that one, we got it ready to go, and then it was like, okay, so we have the equipment, we have the plan, we have the raw audio file. Now I need to remember how to use the software from all the years ago when I was in high school and doing, stuff for my high school radio program. It's like, I know how to edit audio, but it's been 10 years, right? So I had to spend some time with that, really figure out how to go through, clean up both of our audio channels, make this thing sound decent, because, sound is already so important in anything that you're going to do media-wise that involves sound. But when it comes to a podcast, I mean, that is your bread and butter, right? If your audio quality is not good, people are not going to want to listen, period. I mean, there's just no way around that. And I don't blame them. You don't want to crank that thing up in your car when you're driving home from work and there's, static and echoing and all kinds of weird things going on in your
Brown.
ears.
Wah, 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 wah.
Exactly. So, we looked at that, right? And I had to spend some time with that. I also had to figure out how to put together intros. There's music, there's bumpers, there's all those kinds of things. Figure that part out. And then it was like, okay, we're going to start doing brainstorming. We're going to start coming up with who can we get on, who do we want to talk to. And the idea was, I think, to bank episodes. But really what we ended up doing is we created a schedule that we felt was manageable, which is this every 2 weeks program that people here listening are used to, hopefully by now. And we decide, okay, let's put this first episode out. And then we can provide this as sort of an example that we can, as we're reaching out to guests, this is kind of what you can expect the podcast to be like. And we've gone from there. And, we have at times been able to make sort of, headway with having some surplus in terms of, pre-recording things and having episodes ready to go. And other times, we're trying to find people in those 2 week breaks and make this thing happen. And, it's an interesting challenge. It certainly, it adds another element of work to my plate, but I think that it's so worth it for the return that we get out of it. It's an investment that's worth making for sure. And I think that it's been a really fun process. And, if people are out there listening and they're like, gosh, I want to start a podcast, it doesn't have to be the most challenging thing in the world, but I think that it was worth it to take the time to really make sure that when we launched, we were kind of ready to go. I didn't want it to be something that we were sort of editing on the fly and, making changes as we go, because, again, it comes back to that consistency thing, right? Of, I want this to be an organic podcast always, these conversations should always be as organic as possible. And, we try to make sure things aren't scripted here on DAM. I do a little bit for the intro and the outro and everything like that, so I don't stumble over words, but everything else, we hit record, we let this thing fly, and we try and keep it real, because, again, that comes back to sort of making those really human connections through this listening platform. So, it's worth it to take that time. It's worth it to build up towards it and really, make sure that the final product for the person on the other end of this is, everything they could want it to be, and they're not left feeling dissatisfied in any way. But, I also think that it's exciting because it doesn't present an overwhelming amount of challenges, short of like losing an audio file or something like that. I mean, it's pretty smooth sailing once you have the machine up and running.
Yeah. Well, first of all, for those, for folks who haven't seen you, you don't look like you graduated. You're aging beautifully. You don't look like you graduated 10 years ago. So keep that up. You got that going for you. But it's so cool for me personally. I appreciate that. And I hope people understand how valuable that description of your timeline was, because it lays the roadmap out for how you can be successful. We literally were like a 2-week turnaround, right? Once we had done the upfront research, it said, hey, I think we have a communication problem. The decision was made to do it. We dry ran it. And then we just, hey, Danny's got a computer. He's got a camera. He's sitting in his kid's playroom. Who cares? Let's go live. Let's talk to a couple of our managing directors. And it was, COVID topics for the first couple weeks. And then we actually had, we had an employee that was driving home. We have a lot of different bodies of water here in Grant County, a lot of different lakes and things like that. Not just the mighty Columbia, right, towards the south there, but Moses Lake and potholes in the Quincy area, right. You got more stuff up north past like Soap Lake and up into the Banks Lake and that type of space. But driving home, sees one of them small aluminum boats going around and around and around, and nobody's in the boat. He says, man, that looks a little weird. Realizes that there's an elderly gentleman clinging to the side of the boat, and a rescue effort was organized, and this person was safely retrieved from the water. And we were like, we should have that person on. And that was the moment that we realized that, hey, this doesn't have to be dry policy, expectation, numbers, updates, and percentages. And we can really tap into the fact that, we're a people first organization. And that's where our true value is that we put people first. And when you do that, the product always comes out better on the other end. So, and I can tell by the episodes that you've been putting out, you guys are very focused on just educating people on the beauty and the majesty of this entire area, right? And then how all that kind of ties back into how we need to protect the resources that we have, be good stewards to the environment. Grant PUD is very instrumental with you talked about our hatcheries. We're dedicated to our helping not impeding the migration of salmon through our dams. So some state-of-the-art fish bypasses were put in recently within the last few years, I believe, and brought along a little something for that we could dive into that a little bit, but just improving the survival rates of those steelhead that are migrating back to the oceans. It's such a such a rewarding thing to think about how we're contributing in those ways as well, right? Not, also Grant PUD manages 19 recreational sites, right? I mean, there's that whole component. Part of our licensing agreement was that we would maintain some recreational space there on the river. And so just again, so many you flip on the light, you think, oh man, Grant PUD, affordable rates, man, it's so much bigger than that.
Well, I'll tell you a little fun fact about me. Back in, I'd like to say maybe 2013 or 2014, one of those 2 years, I would lean towards 2014. I got to do a little tour of Priest Rapids prior to the one that I did where I shot the video here at River Partners. I got to do a little tour of the hatchery facility there, the dam. Got to see one of those bypass, one of the spillway wares as it was being installed at the time, and also got to take a little tour down below the dam as well and go check out some of the natural spawning sites for the Chinook there. And I mean, it was amazing in that, especially that year, I want to say it was like a hallmark year for salmon. Being familiar now with some of the data at our organization, like the returns that year for fall Chinook were just, I mean, phenomenal. They're one of the best years, if not maybe the best year we've had in a very, very, very long time. Getting to see just the volume of, returning adult salmon coming into spawn, seeing them come through the hatchery, seeing all the work being done there, and getting to check out the inside of the dam and walk across the top of the dam. And, the whole experience, it really opened my eyes as far as, this is what people need to see, because I mean, we can all drive by dams, right? Being down here in Southwest Washington, I get to spend lots of time. I've mentioned on the podcast, frequently, pass by like Bonneville Dam, right? And it's impressive to see it from the road. It's impressive to drive by it, or maybe you go to a recreational site, or you're out there on the boat on one of the reservoirs or whatever. And that's fantastic in and of itself. But yeah, when you see that whole machine really working, when you see the people behind the scenes who are at every level putting their heart and soul into taking care of the salmon that come into those hatcheries, and helping make sure that the next generation of those fish have the best odds of survival going back out to the ocean and everything like that. That's the stuff that I thought right then and there, like, this is a game changer. If people could see this, if people could experience this, even if they can't be there firsthand, because, realistically, we can't let everybody and their dog's uncle, take a tour through a dam all the time, right? I mean, that would be impractical, but at the very least, give them an opportunity to see it somehow or another. That is a fantastic way of getting this message out there. And, in one tour, I had my own view on something that, I was fairly familiar with utilities, right? My family does have some pretty significant background in being involved in the utility industry and things like that. And so, it's been a dinner table conversation for a long time. I always, heard about it. I go into my grandpa's office and he's got framed like diagrams of hydroelectric turbines on the wall and things like that. But again, it didn't really click until it was like, oh, this is what it is. Okay, yeah, now I get it. Now it makes sense, and I want the rest of the world to see that. And I think that's a big thing that not only led me into the career that I'm in now, but also led to the podcast. Is we got to find a way to tell that story and help people experience that.
I got to work for 5 years inside our Grant PUD owns and operates 2 hydro facilities on the Columbia River, Wanapum Dam and Priest Rapids Dam, and been in and out of both facilities, but spent the majority of my time more recently as a maintenance helper at Wanapum Dam. And there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't feel like I was in a documentary, because these are such incredible facilities, and there's so many intricate parts that need to function together to make these generating units run. And then when you're coordinating that with your dispatchers up at the local office and the main dispatch office, the coordination with river flows, when are you spilling water, when are we in fish mode, when are we cranking it up, man, because we need the power. So it truly is awesome. And those tours, unfortunately, feel like those are a thing of the past almost. We had a really incredible fish interpretive center, still do. I mean, it's still there, but it's not utilized for the school children and the things like it used to be. I think just the changing in the times. But right there at the base of our fish ladder there at Wanapum. So as the fish are migrating back up river, they'll use a succession of these step ups that we call the fish ladder to get them past the dams as they migrate upstream. And so, when you mentioned the tours, that's kind of what made me think about that, and preserving that is also incredibly important, because there's a lot of culture here at Grant PUD. One of the things that we're most proud of is our relationship with the Wanapum, some of whom reside adjacent to Priest Rapids Dam. And for more than 60 years, there's been a side-by-side partnership to protect, preserve, and perpetuate the natural culture and resources of the project itself, because that is their way of life. And we want to help them prosper in that, as we've also tried to educate folks on where we've been, going back to the 50s when the projects was licensed. The Wanapum Band of Native Americans committed to a long-lasting relationship built on mutual trust and respect, and to kind of bring it full circle, there was a small archaeological exhibit right there out at on the front of Wanapum Dam in 2015. Grant PUD completed the Wanapum Heritage Center, which, if you're on that highway, oh man, I'm going to mess it up. Right there, taking you through the Hanford area. It's going to connect you between, Vantage and the Tri-Cities area. That highway that cuts through, you'll pass Wanapum Dam. And when you're out there in front of Priest Rapids, you'll see the Wanapum Heritage Center. And it's just a state-of-the-art facility that has had nationally recognized displays that will come and be set up for a short time, but just an incredible reaccounting of the history of great people that have been a partners for us here at Grant PUD, and something that we're very, very proud of.
It really does speak to, people think of, for example, they think of tribes and hydropower just being always at odds, and we try and emphasize that's not the case. River Partners, we've been really fortunate to have some great opportunities in order to be able to partner with some different tribal organizations. And we're always trying to build those relationships and find ways that we can work together. And we do understand that there's certainly been plenty of conflict there. And for good reason, there's, maybe some strained relationships and some challenges that are involved in getting everybody on the same page. But that example in particular, the relationship Grant has there with the Wanapum, it is just fantastic. I mean, it really is, like I said, a great example of making everything work for the utility, for the hydropower facility, for the tribe, for the community, and making creating a space where everyone can kind of be on the same page, working towards the same goal. I'm curious, how did Grant become a owner of hydropower facilities? How did you get involved with that? Because, we do have several utilities. Obviously we have the federal system, right? We have the the Lower Columbia, the Lower Snake, some of the Upper Columbia dams. You think of Grand Coulee and Bonneville as kind of the, sort of flagship dams, if you will. They're, the ones everyone thinks of, right? But we have many hydropower facilities, big and small, and our members, many of them do have their own facilities, and Grant being one of them. And Priest Rapids and Wanapum are not small projects by any means. So, how does a public utility come to, get involved there, be owners, and also, maybe, we can dive into it a little more later. What do those dams do for the community and for the utility?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of history, Austin, and the first electric generating plant on the Columbia River was built at Priest Rapids in 1908. And the community of Beverly was afforded 24-hour electric service. And by the 20s, Grant County communities had this luxury. But in the 30s, still less than half of Grant County farms had power service. And so to meet the need, the Washington State Grange worked really hard at getting legislation passed that authorized the formation of a public utility district. And so our first, Grant County's first public utility district was formed in 1932, provide limited service to what is now the Moses Lake area. Through some changes that were going on, the need for Grant PUD number 2 was formed in 1938. And that year, the people voted to form a countywide PUD, becoming the 18th in the state. And in 1944, Grant PUD acquired all power facilities operated by the Washington Power Company. And that's when the idea to pursue projects on the river kind of began to formulate. And so as the licensing was being conducted, there was work with the Bonneville Power Administration, and we were purchasing power locally from BPA. There was some shortages there, and so in 1952, the Grant PUD commissioners actually filed that application to get a permit to place the Priest Rapids Dam on the Columbia River. Construction of that dam ran from August of 1956 to October of 1961. And Wanapum Dam was started during the time of Priest Rapids Dam and ran from January of 1959 to October of 1963. One of the things that I think is really, really interesting about how Grant PUD came to own and the two dams that we do is that there were no federal tax dollars allotted to the project, and it was all accomplished through okay, we're stretching it a little bit for your boy here, but it had to do with long-term power sales, right? And basically some bonds that were issued. And hey, listen, essentially the folks of Grant County, right, just found a way to make it happen and took over a project that was already there at near the Hanford Reach area, demolished that and started building the dams. And man, that licensing and compliance stuff, shout out to our teams that work on that. I know we just went through kind of a re-licensing period, and it gets really in depth and down into the weeds there. But essentially just wanting to provide for the area and the roughly 5,000 residents back then that said, hey, we need to find a way, and they did.
And that's an interesting thing that you bring up there at the end, especially because some people would question what the role or the responsibility is of a public utility to get involved in something like that. But you also have to keep in mind that a public utility is public. And so, as you mentioned, that this is something that the community as a whole got behind and advocated for, and through the skills and the team membership of people at the utility, been able to pull it off quite successfully to end up where you are today. But it almost answers itself, right? It's like, maybe you could have a conversation about what that role or responsibility is, but ultimately this was the decision of Grant as a community to make this happen and to pursue this. And it's worked out quite well because you have those low rates, you have the ability to pursue things like fiber optic, and maybe that's something else we could dive into a little more, is who you're able to serve now and what you're able to accomplish with having those hydropower projects, and with having such low rates as a result of having hydropower there in the community. You've touched on maybe some ag and big customers, but aside, people know or might be familiar, if you're even just to look at a map or something, you've got like Ephrata, Moses Lake, Quincy, kind of all the lakes, all the really nice areas to recreate up there in central Washington, and kind of those scab lands, I think they call it. But what's kind of the business community side of Grant PUD look like?
Yeah, a lot of our towns are small and rural. Moses Lake is the largest in the area with I believe roughly 26,000 folks. But as a whole, we have almost 90,000 people that live here in Grant County. We do have this industry sector as well, with some of the larger corporations that have come in that actually, instead of producing space for Google or other search engines, right? These large server farms, but we also have some really cool industry that has provided a lot of really good jobs for folks in the area. Some production. We also have some really awesome local businesses that rely on our affordable rates to keep, man, with the prices of things going up everywhere and folks trying to keep things affordable for their core customers, they need affordable rates to be able to continue to provide the services that they provide. So it's really neat to see, and the recreating itself is almost an industry here. With the great opportunities that we have for boating and fishing and hunting and all those things that come in between. We've got beautiful parks and things of that nature. So there's always fun things to do outdoors, but we don't get crazy weather swings, but we have been known to hit some high highs and some low lows, and that's when keeping the power on for those businesses and those customers is the most crucial. And we have just a fantastic group of folks that ensure that those services are readily available for folks.
As a guy who's not just a podcast host, but also, in your kind of role there at the utility, a problem solver, what are some of the challenges and problems that, in your currently that you're facing there at the utility?
I think it's a lot of what everyone is dealing with, and that's just growth. I mean, the world is growing. Our small county is growing, and so how do you meet the needs of a growing society? In the space that we serve, and so it kind of already touched on some infrastructure. We're building substations. We're upgrading existing infrastructure. We are coordinating new transmission lines. That's a big lift in itself. I mean, you can throw a few poles in the ground to get a service out to a remote location of the county, but when you're talking those big transmission lines, that is not a quick install, right? So as we try to keep up with that, we also try to do it in the safest and most reliable manner possible. So balancing that with this demand has probably, from where I sit, big picture, those are really some of the biggest challenges that our organization is currently facing. And a couple of things that we have done about that is when the Priest Rapids project was originally finished, it produced almost 790 megawatts of power, and Wanapum Dam produced roughly 830 megawatts of power. Recently, Wanapum Dam finished a 25-year unit rehab where we were with new turbines, more efficient and fish friendly, new generating units, and now Wanapum Dam produces almost 1,100 megawatts. So stepping it up at our projects currently, Priest Rapids Dam units are getting the same rehab. So looking to boost output there. The refinements made there currently have Priest Rapids Dam at 956 megawatts. So quite a bit of load that we've been able to add to that. Now we don't get 100%, even though we own these plants, we don't get 100% of the power that we produce. We keep about 63% of it, and then the rest is kind of handled through some other obligations and agreements and things of that nature, and feeding into, again, that greater good, right? Working with BPA, we share some switch yards with them, so doing our part and providing that power. In fact, one of your recent guests, the communications from Montana, mentioned they get their power from the Columbia Basin. I was like, hey, shout out, right? I think that's pretty darn cool. And then looking ahead towards these other clean energy options and again trying to build that portfolio so that we can ensure the longevity of Grant County residents and businesses and agriculture, but also be able to meet the needs of the small, medium, and large industrial that are coming to the area. So sometimes I feel like it's a little bit of like a gold rush or like a struck oil, right? Hey, Grant County's got really cool rates. Let's get over there. That's what it feels like sometimes. Man, we got a couple thousand requests in or load requests for future, and our large power solutions group does a great job just kind of managing that, right? Because you can't grow too fast, Austin. You can't be a slave to the demand or to the requests. You have to serve the demand and be mindful of how you're growing and doing it in a responsible way. And I think that's something that is a key focus for our commissioners, our general manager, and our executive leadership, and that just cascades down to the entire organization.
It's an interesting conversation to have because people, there's sort of two sides of it, right? You have the people that are like, yes, please, more growth. More growth is a good thing. The more business we bring in, the more, economic development that goes on, all these things. Fantastic. Bring it on. We want to build up a community, right? And then you have the other side of it where maybe, I'm sure there's people that are going like, please, I just want to have my little plot of land out in the middle of nowhere. I don't want any of this. I just want to be left alone. They don't want any growth. And then somewhere in the middle there is sort of everything else that has to be reasonably, rationally figured out, which is how do you actually grow? How do you not grow too fast? How do you still encourage growth? Because the lifestyles that people like to live, they require things like servers and manufacturing and agriculture. I mean, these are all important. They all rely on energy, but they're kind of becoming more and more equally as essential to our regular lives. Is like, you need food, you need water, you need internet access, you got to have clothes to put on, and something to get you into town and back. And there's a lot that goes into what makes sort of life here in the Northwest and life here in our country for that matter operate. And I can only imagine how many really intelligent people it takes to solve all these problems and make it happen so that it's smooth, and for people that aren't involved in all of that growth planning and development, that they can continue to live their lives without some sort of major interruption.
Yeah, and it's scary. I mean, it's scary for folks like you just talked about. And I think that's where again, the ties to our community. Folks know that Grant PUD has their best interests at heart. And it's all about getting that messaging out there to them. And, one of the things that I think that is probably, it's hard for me to kind of put into some numbers, but I can say that some of those large industrial customers that we've been speaking about, the revenues that are generated from those large industrials truly help keep rates low for our core customers. And that's a piece that there's a lot of numbers associated with that. But when you have that trust in the utility, when you have that faith, I think that can go a long way. Our mission is to safely, efficiently, and reliably provide electric power and fiber optic broadband services to our customers. And with over 40,000 of those customers in Grant County, we strive every day to ensure that not only do the lights stay on, but that people understand what is going on really with their utility. And we're committed to the community that we serve because these are our friends and our families and our neighbors. We have deep ties here. We have folks that are third generation, right? I talked to somebody yesterday. Their grandfather helped build Wanapum Dam. I mean it's not a place where people come and go often. And we have some of that, right? I mean, I'm not going to lie. In this changing business landscape, you can't only grow from within. Right? You have to be knowledgeable of the fact that there are people with that can provide incredible value to your mission, but that may not be able to relocate. And in this new environment that you and I are interacting in right now, that may not make sense to somebody that's been farming potatoes for 50 years, right? And their dad farmed before them, and they're passing the farm on to their son. Hey, they just want the pump to come on when they need water. Right. And so there's that communication piece that I think, again, shout out to our public affairs team for the great job that they do. But then, our customers see us in the community. We coach their kids' sports teams. We are at the fair and constantly doing other community service stuff. We promote events for the kids. We just got done doing solar car races for the elementary school kids, and we're doing archaeology days where the kids can come and learn about that culture and heritage that we talked about. We do fundraisers to donate for causes. We have Share the Warmth, where we raise funds to help people that can't pay their power bills in the winter. I mean, those are the kinds of things that just really fill me to the brim with pride that I get to come to work here every day and be a part of that. And all the while having these incredible hydro facilities on the river, and a couple, we also have a couple in the canals, Potholes East Canal and Quincy Chute, right? A couple of small hydros that Grant PUD has been maintaining, right? There's some contractual stuff in there that I'm not 100% familiar with, right? Told you it's going to happen. Sorry about it. But it's just a litany of ways that we are providing in the community, and just trying to do the best we can for those folks every day.
I'm so glad you're able to bring all this up too, because and this is not anything against anyone there at Grant, or for that matter anyone in the utility communication space period, but so often what I find is that I'm constantly learning about the vast amount of stuff that utilities are doing in their communities, and that's something that through this podcast I hope lots of people are able to learn as well, is all the things that our members are doing in their communities. And I think even with the best communications, even with the best outreach and everything like that, I mean there's so much that people can either get involved in or take advantage of in regards to their local public utility that they're probably not aware of. And so yeah, I mean, just everything you listed off there is so fantastic, and I hope that if anyone's listening to this and they're in that Grant area, that they get involved, and if not, find out who your public utility is, and take a look and see what they got going on, because that information is out there. It's just, sometimes people I don't think they have the time to look at it, or, maybe they glance at it, as they're paying their bill or something like that, but it never really registers in their head maybe that, oh gosh, that could be a really good opportunity, or maybe I could really benefit from that program. I'm struggling and I need, some help, and that's something I could take advantage of. So, with all that going on, what are you personally excited about? What's going on there? I'm sure there's plenty that, speaking on behalf of Grant today that you could bring up, but yeah, what's going on there that personally, gets you fired up as far as what you guys are working on?
Okay, this kind of does, but kind of doesn't. We'll get there, right? Roundabout. Give me a second here. But what the organization is doing internally to support employees, I think, is one of the things that excites me the most, right? If you don't have engaged, employees that are looking out for the best interest of the customer, then I think you fall short. If you're not serving your people first internally, they can't in turn serve the customers externally. And I think, that goes back to an individual basis, right? We talk about self-care. I mean, we did a whole hour of mental health on our podcast one time. It was one of our landmark episodes discussing mental health in the workplace. I mean, almost a taboo topic in some instances, but we're opening that door. With our employee assistance program, our employees association, right? Bringing that community within internally, trying to drive that connection and empower folks to be leaders within their work area, to bring forth these opportunities to connect and to interact, not just in the work environment, but setting up hikes or other trips to the lake or other art and crafts events, things like that, and then seeing how we're trying to standardize and be more efficient in our processes, and setting up, standing up departments like continuous improvement, organizational change management, corrective action program, shout out, right? Also looking at our employee experience department and those types of things, organizational development, training for leaders. I mean, these are all things that an organization has to consider as far as just buying into supporting your employees. And so all the things that we covered. Again, we've got 100 guests here that could do 100 podcasts for you that on all these deep dives into the things that we've touched on today. But just for your boy here personally, those are the things that really excite me, because that's what's going to arm me to be able to do the best job I can every day, which in turn just keeps the wheels turning on keeping the lights on, or the turbine, I should say, keeps the turbine spinning on keeping the lights on.
Oh, that's fantastic. And yeah, I mean, whether it's the community planning that you brought up, whether it's bringing people low rates and keeping those turbines spinning and everything like that, you don't get there without having the community of the utility, without having the employees, happy and feeling good about the direction and feeling like they're part of something. I mean, if you have a bunch of drained people there that are just trying to get by and earn a paycheck or whatever, you're probably not going to have a very great outcome, which doesn't translate to a great outcome for, the entire Grant community. And also, by the way, as you touched on a little bit, the utility is providing benefits beyond its own community, right? I mean, the hydropower assets, the different planning that you're doing, the economic benefits of growth and development, everything like that, it provides benefits to the Northwest and beyond. So, it's important to make sure that you're supporting the people within and making sure that you're building that foundation so that you're able to have all that function and go smoothly and turn out well. So I couldn't agree with you more on that.
And admittedly, we don't always get it right. We're not perfect. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I feel like is kind of the next iteration of where we're going is, hey, we want to become a learning organization, right? And that's not to say that we haven't learned from our past and that we haven't applied those moving forward, but down to, getting to the individual frontline contributor. You know what I mean? The messaging is, hey, we're all human. We're not perfect. We're putting our best foot forward every day, but then that communication that kind of goes back up the ladder, right? Establishing those lines, I think, is imperative within an organization. And dude, I get to do that once a week, right? Like I get to be instrumental. Like how cool is that? I get to be instrumental in that part of it, right? And it's a sliver. I mean, geez, our general manager forums still have better ratings than the podcast. I don't know what's up with that, right? We gotta figure out, we gotta do some market research, right? Figure out what's going on there. But just kidding. Shout out to our GM forums, but just all the ways we're trying to communicate to folks, get everybody on the same page so we're all pointed in the same direction. And listen, lots of change happening all over the place. One of the best sayings I've heard recently is that any change imposed will be a change opposed. So how do you deal with the human aspect of preparing people for the change, supporting them through the change? Those are the kinds of things that we're working on internally here.
And, again, when you're able to do that internally, I think that it's almost kind of like leading from the top down, right? If the utility can internally prepare its own folks for change and make those transitions smoothly, then it translates to, hey, when we need to make changes for clean energy, when we make changes for those transmission lines you mentioned, things like that, you're able to also provide that same sort of support and working through those changes with your community as well. And, something else you said is just how much learning opportunity there is. And I've certainly learned a lot from you talking to you today on the podcast. And hopefully we can do a little bit of a ratings boost for you here. I hope some Grant people are listening in on this. Maybe they'll catch this thing on LinkedIn or, I'll send out a link to you and everything like that. And hopefully you can get a shout out there somewhere with some internal internal communications there, but
Well, I'm hoping to do the same thing. I'm hoping to drive folks to your podcast, right? Because I was fortunate enough to get the heads up when Kurt came on and joined me. But similarly, man, I'm hoping that just by the fact that the folks that are used to listening to me every week, they might come and check it out. So there's a two-way street there, man. Like, because I feel like the more people can get dialed in, not with the messaging on this podcast, on the official podcast of the Northwest, right? Don't know if I nailed that or not, but I think it's more of that information sharing. That's really what it is. That educating, that learning, and share this with somebody. Maybe not this episode, right? I mean, maybe not this particular one, right? But definitely share this podcast with everybody you know.
Well, hey, I would say listen to this one too, because right off the top of the head, I always try and do kind of an outro after we wrap up our recording and everything like that, and kind of make a smooth transition, out of the episode and hopefully into the next one. But just off the top of my head, it's like, gosh, I had no idea about any of the history that you shared about Priest Rapids, and about the improvements there with the turbines and the amount of the additional megawatts that are being generated at both those facilities, which, I probably sound like a broken record, but I always try and reiterate, think about dams not as just the concrete structure, but everything that's going on within. And maybe they were built decades ago, but as far as, the internal workings and what's going on there, those are constantly being worked on. But I'll get off that tangent for now. The thing that's, I think, so great about this is that, whether it's the programs that you shouted out, whether it's the Wanapum Heritage Center, I mean, there's so many takeaways that people can get from these conversations. And I hope that people listen to this one. I hope people listen to our backlog of episodes and subscribe so you can hear future episodes. And I hope people will also go and check out what you've got going on there, especially being that it's internal, those folks at Grant that are going to hopefully hear this one are going to go check out yours. So if people are not listening to you currently, where can they find you? How can they find you? What's the name of what you do? Give us the scoop on, again, obviously some of our listeners, maybe many of our listeners aren't going to be able to necessarily take advantage of this. They're not Grant employees. Sorry, but, we'll work on getting some fantastic guests from the utility over there on and probably do lots of future episodes of Damn with some of these folks. But give yourself a little bit of a shameless plug so that people can figure out how to listen to all the great stuff you got going on.
Man, hey, so for all the Grant fam that may be listening to this, check me out every Thursday live at 2:00. We're going to be bringing you some really good information and having a little fun while we're doing it. So be prepared with your questions and just come and join us. Listen, this has been just a fantastic opportunity for me. I'm so glad we were able to pull it together kind of last minute, and sharing that common piece of podcast hosting, although very, 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 very different, but it all kind of ties back to that same messaging. I mentioned earlier, Kevin Nort, shout out to you. I know he plays an integral role with Northwest River Partners. I was talking to him just before the podcast, right? And most everybody I've told, as I was trying to gather some information for this, was very well aware of Northwest River Partners. Didn't know y'all had a podcast. So, I mean, let's get some of that moving, right? Because ultimately, whereas folks can't come and listen to this guy talk about, updates to the ethics policy or financial attribute allocation or brisket barbecuing for 4th of July. I mean, just a couple things that we've done around here, not to mention telling great individual stories of accomplishments, highlighting projects that we've completed, giving updates to folks on those types of things, promoting upcoming events, whereas you guys are delivering such a powerful message that one guy's opinion everyone needs to hear. Keep up the great work that you guys are doing, because it is incredibly impactful. And thanks for letting me come on today.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you coming on. It's been really fun, and everything you just mentioned there. I hope, if nothing else, when people take away their thoughts about this episode, it's something they remember, that every time you flip that light switch, that's all the stuff that's going into it, on the other end of things. Maybe not literally, right? I mean, that's electrons and all sorts of energy science that even I'm not fully up to speed on, but I'll leave that to the electrical engineers, the professionals in that space. But as far as what makes that light switch flip and work, and what makes that seamless every time, 24/7, year round, I mean, that's all the stuff that goes into it, is everything you're talking about, it, making the utility work and function the way it does. So really appreciate you sharing that knowledge and all the other great things you shared today. There's one more thing that I have to ask you to do. I think you probably know what's coming, because you've listened to past episodes of Damn. And it is our closeout. It's the advice. I ask everybody for advice, and some people have no idea it's coming. Some people do. I guess it depends on if you're one of the lucky ones that's listened to an episode of Damn before you come on and be a guest. But it's something that I like to do, because, again, we're trying to make that human connection that we touched on earlier in the episode. And there's, I think, nothing more genuine, nothing more, speaks to the character of the guests themselves, than being able to share something that is personally valuable to you, that you can pass on to the audience and give them something really nice to close out an episode of a podcast on. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Yeah, I did know this was coming. And as I heard some of your other guests' responses, I didn't want it to sway what I might say today. But I guess, just speaking genuine from the heart, what comes to mind is just having love in your heart for what you do and the people that you serve and the people that you work with. I mean, understanding that we're all human. We all make mistakes, giving each other that grace. I mean, that's what I mean by that love in your heart, that respect. You never know what somebody else might be going through. The understanding, the listening, all those things that to me really speak to love in your heart for another human being that's getting through life and facing challenges that may be similar to yours, may be different than yours. And I think that just dovetails perfectly into, the messaging on this podcast is met in some places with some dispute, right? And I think that as long if you're always coming to it from a place of love in your heart and those, in that general sense, I think you can come to a place of understanding, and that's really what I think halts a lot of progress in a lot of places, is that people don't have that in as the place that they're showing up from, right? They're not showing up with that genuine love for another human being and what they may be going through in that moment. So I just like to ask everybody to spread a little love today. And if you'll indulge me one more time on my show, I always do a little bit of send off, and I always say that for my guests and the entire podcast team, this has been Damn, and we are out.
Oh, that's fantastic. Part of me wants to speak to what you just said, and part of me wants to say, clip this thing. Let's get out of here. I'll just leave him with this. You touched on that, and we talked a lot about COVID leading us to where we are today, and you doing a mental health episode. I think that your message is so important, and I think that your advice is incredibly important. And I listen to anything we said today. Don't listen to anything we said today, but listen to that advice. And take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And I hope that the Grant fam is taking care of each other today and always moving forward, because we really appreciate you guys, and you are truly one of our beloved members here at River Partners. So thanks for making this happen. Thanks for saving Dam, quite literally, this week. There'd be no episode. I will, gosh, your closeout was so good, and I'm just over here totally butchering it. But let me say one more interesting thing that I've heard recently that I think you'll find interesting. Supposedly, only 1% of all podcasts make it past the 21st episode. Now, you've done what, at least 160, given that you've covered 160
topics? Yeah, we turned 3 years old a couple weeks ago. Yep.
So with that in mind, we're on episode 10 here. Gosh, I want to be in that 1% so bad. Damn deserves to be in that 1% so bad. And we would forge on, even if we had to take a hiatus, we would forge on with this podcast regardless. But we got episode 10 in the books. We're marching forward. We're going to make it happen. And you have been an integral part of that. And I appreciate you taking the time, cutting some time out of your lunch hour, making this possible. Sincerely, really appreciate it. Thank you. And I hope that we get to talk to lots more folks over there at Grant PUD. Some of the people that you get to have on there, on your podcast, tell them about Dam, tell them to reach out. Let's get them on here. Let's talk about all the great things you guys are doing. And really, really excited about this one.
Thank you, Austin.
Today was an especially fun episode of Dam, and I'm so glad Danny was able to join us on such short notice. If you've taken the time to read our little intro blurb about Dam, you'd know that we share the stories of the most interesting folks you've probably never heard of, from salmon scientists and policymakers to the heroes of public power. We've had some great crossover with Danny and the Grant fam, as he touched on, so when the opportunity came up to get him on the pod, I knew we had to make that happen right away, as I'd certainly describe him as one of those heroes of public power. As always, I cannot make any promises here with regards to future episodes, but with all of the various things we discussed that are happening at Grant PUD and in the community, it's our intention to explore some of those topics even further. Like Danny said, there's probably more than 100 episodes worth of Dam just in that alone. Although I could probably also say that for every organization that's been represented in our 10 episodes thus far. Now, speaking of future episodes and great topics and guests to cover, I suppose this is a good time to plug something that I don't do often enough here on the podcast. Now, while I always promote our website, nwriverpartners.org, I would especially encourage you, the listener, to utilize our contact form to fill us in on potential guests and topics you'd like us to cover. We're open to any and all suggestions that help us continue to provide the best Northwest hydropower podcast possible. I mean, heck, how cool would it be to talk to that grandfather who was involved in building Priest Rapids Dam? I'm sure that there's some of those folks out there that are listening right now that have those kinds of connections or know somebody who might be able to tell us something really interesting and share a unique perspective on Northwest hydropower. So let's work together and make some great things happen. Now, if you don't have anything like that, you can even if you don't have something like that to share with us, you can help us continue to grow by leaving positive reviews on the listening platform you're currently using. We always encourage your reviews to be honest, of course, but it's those positive ones in particular that satisfy the algorithms that we're all at the mercy of. The more we get, the more listeners we can potentially reach, and the more great episodes of Dam we can produce in the future. Likewise, just by tapping that subscribe button and turning on notifications for future episodes not only helps us out, it also makes sure that you won't miss future episodes when they release every other Friday. Finally, you can find us on social media to see what we're up to. We can be found at NW River Partners on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and I would encourage everyone to go check us out there. All right, I'm going to get out of here, but rather than leaving you on my usual short and sweet see ya, I'm going to let Danny take it away with that awesome outro he gave us during our recording.
For my guests and the entire podcast team, this has been Damn, and we are out.